It's time for the Daily Stand Up Podcast presented by Agile Dad with your host, Lee Henson. Without any further ado, let's get started. In a recent article by Kevin Bendler, sorry, I want to make sure I get his name right. He posted a blog post that they asked for a review on. One of my readers asked me to review. It's called I Don't Like Safe. So what's really interesting about this is, at first I thought it was just going to be a big dig on Safe. But as I read through the article, I found that it was very interesting. So Kevin has some background in software development. He's been a developer for over 10 years. And a good chunk of it was using SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework. And he talks about the attempts of SAFe to scale up things in large enterprises, including stuff like release train, program increments, budgeting, DevOps, all the benefits that come from using SAFe. But he goes on to discuss the things that he doesn't like about SAFe. And somebody asked me to give input on those and to talk about whether or not I agree or disagree with this assessment. So here we go. So coming in at the top, he says, nothing in any Agile method suggests that we need to measure work units, i.e. story points, in uniform manner across teams. Okay, let's stop there. That is true. However, if you don't set a benchmark or a baseline and have teams use similar story point methods, what ends up happening is you end up with disparate story point estimates. So you end up with one team that says this is a 1 when somebody else says this is a 1. So at the end of a sprint, you might have one team completing 10 points, another team completing 20 points, and a team completing 200 points. You need to have something that's going to help the teams be predictable. Now, while I'm not saying everyone has to follow the same exact walking orders, what I am saying is it's important for them to at least pick a baseline so that if they have a similar baseline, then they can get more accurate progressive estimating when it comes to estimating larger batches of work, which makes sense. So he goes on and he says, so story points exist to help people doing the work break things down into an optimum batch size. I agree, but it also, if you look at it this way, forces them to start thinking in terms of time. I want them to think in terms of deliverables, right? And he goes on to say, which makes deliverables achievable. Okay, so he did go with deliverable map, which is good. Uh, and he says SAFe actually encourages larger batch sizes. That is true. Through extensive front loaded planning, which is also true, and not smaller sizes that are planned through more iterative methods. Okay, so far, number one, I agree. SAFe tries to normalize story points across every team, but they also do heavy loaded upfront planning. I'm not I'm not agreeing that normalizing story points is a bad idea. I think normalizing story points is a good idea. I think that trying to do all that heavyweight upfront planning is the bad idea. I mean, if you can do things in the now, that's great. But if you have to do minimal upfront planning, that's also great. I just don't want to have people who are doing large amounts of upfront planning. Next, he talks about technical debt. He says technical debt tends to increase in SAFe organizations because the prioritization of dealing with the debt is raised to management level rather than team level taking care of it. That is 100% true. It's counterproductive for technical debt that originates at a team level to percolate up to management, and they all tend to prioritize features, functions, and other things ahead of debt. Absolutely. And this is why we push whenever teams or organizations are even attempting to implement SAFe that they implement the practice of holding a full technical debt sprint at least once a quarter, allocating at least 2 weeks to go in and to take care of debt related items. Because everyone knows that trying to implement scaled agile with all that upfront work with a heavy debt load on top of it makes it impossible for you to ever get to the debt, and the debt grows and gets worse, and fundamentally it's just a bad idea. So overarching, yes, I think that number two about technical debt makes sense. Number three, if SAFe is applied to more operational functions such as technology support, operations, or maintenance, it conflicts between delivery and support functions arise. Okay, well, this once again can be solved pretty easy with the implementation of something like Team John, where you have dedicated people to address these that rotate off each sprint. So you can address these issues as they arise, either in the current cycle or in the very next cycle. And if it doesn't fall into any of those, it gets known but not resolved and archived. So I think there's behavioral things that are not being applied here that are causing these to be issues. Number four, due to the focus on deliverables and accountability through project or product managers, teams can be discouraged from assisting each other as they are measured by their own delivery method and by how much, not by how much they assist other teams. Okay, because that's rarely valued. So here's the deal. Oh, it goes on to say this value or this goes against everything other Agile frameworks stand for, in particular the five Scrum values, which is the force, focus, openness, respect, commitment, and extreme courage. Uh, okay, I think it's a stretch to tie them back to the five values, but what I do feel is that when it comes to accountability, teams should have their own measure of accountability and they should have a working agreement. So, once again, what I'm seeing here for number four is that this is more symptomatic of not having things in place than it is uh, a result of doing safe poorly. Coming in at number five, the concept of ideal dev days is often used in estimating and safe. I agree with that. You shouldn't use time based estimates. Dev days are a fallacy. I agree. We want to stay away from anything that teaches us that time equals productivity. What equals productivity is finding the most efficient way to get things done, but it's not all time based. We need to almost throw time out and look at things and say, out of what value are we getting out of these things? And I think value driven is the big key here. Number six, the concept of value often breaks down in safe. Go figure. Through focus on a volume of delivery and meeting the arbitrary deadlines imposed by management and PI planning. So yeah, what they're trying to say here is management has a heavy hand in PI planning, and a deliverable is not focused on outcome or on values. The deliverable is focused on a breakdown of the actual work using arbitrary deadlines. I get it. And that anytime you're doing heavy front-loaded planning, you're going to have that. So when you're talking about PI or program increment planning, that's really rigid, and it's not. There's no adaptation involved at all. It's going to cause you to have great confusion, and it's going to cause you to fall into the trap, as I call it. I call that the safe trap. So you need to understand that it does require Agile requires some upfront planning, but it doesn't require that much upfront planning, which leads to number seven. It says PI planning includes a small element of retrospective activity, but it's too little too late. Okay, I agree. You need a formal retrospective to start feedback loops and get things going. And you want this to be short and light feedback. You don't want to create it in such a way that it's so heavy handed and there's so much weight attached to it that people are intimidated to say what they really feel. We need to make sure that people have no frustrations, that everything's left on the table or left at the door, and then we have an opportunity to talk about the things that are important so that we can make sure that we understand how PI planning is supposed to work and how retrospectives is supposed to work and how we can reflect. Because, fundamentally, if you look at SAFE, he goes on to say it tends to ignore or encourages management to ignore the possibility that those closest to the work might be best equipped to make decisions about it. See, that's where I'm starting to say we drew the line in the sand. I don't think SAFE says that. I think what SAFE says is that there has to be coordination between the people who are planning the work and the people who are doing the work. And it's not that they don't trust the people doing the work to give valuable input and whatnot. It's just that they feel like the people who are planning the work need to be aware of what the people who are doing the work are doing in order to make better choices. And I think that there's a great disconnect here. And that's something that happens a lot in SAFE. So, in a nutshell, I'm going to go here. I would argue that most of the points, Kevin, that you brought up are symptoms of other problems that are causing you or others not to like SAFE, not necessarily SAFE itself being bad. Because honestly, here's my confession. I used to think that SAFE was a horrible thing. I used to think that SAFE was too big, too fast, and that it was promoting people to not be careful. It was promoting carelessness about how people went through and did things. Then it became very heavily loaded up front and rigid, more rigid than any other agile methods. But then over time, the pendulum started to swing back to the middle, and I'm starting to see some balance in SAFE that I really like. So tune in to future episodes to see if we can get this all straight. Because honestly, what it sounds like this team needs is a strong agile coach, not someone who's just going to tell them that SAFE is bad. So there you have it. That's my 2 cents. I hope you enjoyed my review of this episode, this podcast, or not podcast, this blog post. Geesh, I hope you enjoyed the review that I made in this episode about this blog post. There we go. That's better. If you have a topic or a blog post that you want us to review, feel free to reach out to us. Learn more at agiledad.com. We'd love to hear your topic. And as always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.